Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited about this interview today because I have somebody here to talk about something so very close to my heart, which is meditation. And based on my experience and what we know about the need to disarm the nervous system and rebuild our system with intention, meditation is integral in recovering from long COVID. So, to talk about meditation, we have not just a meditation teacher, but the Honorable Lama Tsomo, who is one of the few American lamas in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. She's also a spiritual teacher. She is an author. She is the co-founder of the Namchak Retreat Center and the Namchak Foundation. She has her MA in counseling psychology. She's also a mother and a grandmother and a devoted dog mother. She's a health nut and she's a science buff, a science geek like I am. So we couldn't be more grateful to have you here to discuss such an important topic to us. Um,
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about it. This is what I
well,
want to talk about.
well, and you're so good at it. And I'm so excited to talk about the benefits of meditation. And because you have this great science background, you can understand how meditation and the body work together. So, yeah, thank you. It's going to be a great talk. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks. Again, I'm just really happy to be here.
Well, let's get started. The first question I have for you is because you have this great, vast knowledge of meditation and how it affects the mind and body, can you talk a little bit about why meditation is so beneficial to the health of the body?
Well, so one benefit I discovered when I had a friend who had a biofeedback device he had plugged into his computer, and there was a finger sensor, and it could sense when the heart and the brain were in sync with each other. Right. I don't know if you've heard of heart math, but
Mhm.
he was a heart math coach. And so I was like, well, let me give that a whirl. And so he had me imagine something scary. And so I imagined something scary. I think it was a bear chasing me or something. And the graph immediately showed a readout where it looked like a drunken spider had been wandering all over the place. It was really erratic and, looked pretty awful. And then he said, okay, think of something more, comfortable or whatever. Well, of course, being a meditator, I immediately went into a particular meditation that I happened to love. And I was sitting there savoring that and spent, a couple minutes doing that. And I opened my eyes and it was this beautiful sine wave like this. And he said, you're the only person I've seen go with no training right into 100% entrainment between the heart and the brain. And I knew why. Actually, he was the second person he knew, he himself, because he had studied meditation. His was yogic meditation, but it was actual, meditation, similar techniques. So when your nervous system powers down like that and moves into that smooth, entrained place where everything is in harmony, then all of your longevity factors go up. Your immune system gets stronger and is able to be regulated.
Mhm.
And so all of the desirable things that we all want in the body get to happen, but not just in the body. Some of the brain changes that my friend Dr. Richard Davidson has studied showed what can happen for your mind. And of course, when the mind is happier, then the body goes into this state that I was describing. And when the body then can power down, then the brain can even go into a more coordinated state within itself.
Mhm.
And he did a fascinating study, he and sort of the people in his lab. they got some real experts at meditation, like beyond me. We're talking, some of the greatest Tibetan masters around today. And they put these caps on that had all these sensors around. So it's a good thing they had shaved heads. So they were checking to see how the brain waves were, all the various brain waves that we put out. And one of them that only happens in like these special eureka moments when everything is just perfectly in sync and perfectly evened out and so on. That's when you get maybe a burst of gamma waves.
Mm.
And you hear about alpha waves. You don't hear much about gamma waves because people don't usually experience that. Only just very occasionally. Well, when they put the caps on these folks, before they even meditated, they already had them going on. And then when they sat and meditated, they were literally off the charts. There had never been readings like this. And so they immediately came in and said, I'm so sorry, there's something wrong with the equipment. And they were futzing and everything. And, they went back, same thing happened. They went back and forth. They were like, what is wrong with the equipment? They finally realized the equipment was fine. Those were the readings.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And then this other guy who wanted to debunk that study, another scientist who was, on the Chinese side of things. And of course, they wanted to debunk meditation, anything spiritual, anything Tibetan. So he got the same masters over to his lab. And they were treating them roughly and, of course, didn't like them and, were sending out bad vibes and everything. But these were professionals, right? So they put the caps on the monks and they sit there. And again, the assistants come running in. Oh, there's something wrong with the equipment. Same readings.
Oh my gosh. Oh, love that, right? I mean, that just, how can you argue with that?
That's right. I mean, even somebody who was against it and trying to debunk it got the
Right,
same readings.
right.
So, again, you're seeing this beautiful weaving back and forth between body and mind throughout the nervous system, and the effects that can happen through various kinds of meditation. There isn't just one kind. You hear mindfulness, which I've sort of become a little allergic to that word because everybody throws it around and do they know what they mean? I don't know what they mean, but there are various kinds of meditation.
Right. Well, that reminds me of something that we spoke about a few weeks ago, which was with, and, forgive me for using the word mindfulness, but when people can slow down enough to become maybe mindful of these sensations arising, you spoke so beautifully about that dance between this fight or flight and the amygdala and how we can interrupt that, which that's the piece to me that
Mhm.
I found so beneficial in my recovery of just not remaining within a state of fight or flight, but able to stop that a little bit and through my meditation practice.
Yeah, and so there are a couple of different forms of meditation, for beginners because usually, our minds are kind of like puppy dogs and, squirrel.
Yeah.
We just sort of, our minds get led by stimulus around us and stimulus inside. We don't even know, a lot of times we don't notice the stimulus. And non-meditators have a harder time distinguishing between thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Those are
Mm,
three different things
mhm,
than meditators because we're used to turning the lens inside, for one thing.
mm,
But the other thing is it gives you a tool so that your mind isn't just like a puppy dog without a leash, if you will, and you can train your puppy dog.
right.
You can actually train your mind. And you don't want to make the puppy do a downstay for an hour, the first, you know, lesson. They're going to learn to hate lessons. And the way I work with my dogs, and I do love my dogs, I start with, just a few seconds of downstay
Mhm.
and big treats, big pets, and then another downstay. And we do that for just a short training session. And then maybe later in the day, have them do a few more. and again, treats and pets, so that they associate those times, those class times, if you will, with, oh, this is fun, this feels good.
Right.
And they get longer and longer with their downstays until I can have them stay down for an hour.
Wow.
And they'll just lie down. And when they realize this is going to be a while, they do a big sigh and they settle in. They start to doze off, and they just chill.
Yeah.
So we can do that with our minds.
Well, and you do that, and you teach not just your dogs this, but you teach humans this, which, I'll put in the show notes that, how to access the Namchak Foundation and how people can listen to some of your meditations and access these classes. And I forgot to mention in the beginning of the intro is that we talked that you're going to lead us through a meditation at some point during this talk. So people, this is a real treat. So I wanted to make sure to mention that. So disarming the nervous system through learning to sit or be mindful, or we can use another term, to kind of quiet that static, and getting past that level of static is one part of it. And then we can change the, the amygdala from
Mm-hmm.
act, that piece. And
Mm-hmm.
then we interrupt a pattern rather than staying in a fight or flight.
Yeah.
And there are a number of different types of meditations that can be done. And even those that have never meditated before, I know that for me, when I had meditated for years, but when I had long COVID, it was almost beyond my capacity initially to just sit and meditate. And so I know that you've talked about certain meditations that might be a little bit more accessible for somebody at, at, at an earlier stage when they're really struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a couple of things about that. First of all, there was a great book that was a bestseller decades ago called Love is Letting Go of Fear.
Mm.
And one thing that he pointed out, that was Gerald Jampolsky, the author. One thing he pointed out was that you cannot hold love and fear simultaneously in the same moment in your mind. And we've heard a lot of us about right brain, left brain, this kind of thing. So, how can we change channels, if you will, at
Mm.
will, so that we can move into more love and compassion rather than the fight or flight?
Mhm.
And so, there is a meditation that I'm thinking of that we could do today that helps you to do that. And unlike the meditations that most people have heard about, like shamatha and vipassana, where you're actually supposed to let go of thoughts, let go of thoughts. Every time they come up, you let them go. And that's a very good practice because thoughts are going to come all the time. The brain is a thinking machine. But we can see the thought and then let it pass through. It's almost like, I think of it almost like a rope passing across my hand. And I can register, yep, there's this rope. I can feel it and everything, and just let it keep going. And I don't have to hold on and get pulled off my seat. So that's how I think of shamatha meditation. But in this meditation, you actually get to make up stories in your mind. It's almost like you get to have an internal conversation. And those are the very things you're supposed to let go of in shamatha. Here you get to do that, but in service of changing channels from fight or flight to love and compassion.
Mm. That's just, yeah. And I think that that is such an important piece, especially because when you are in that state, and yes, ideally just letting it go would be ideal, it would be perfect, maybe. But being able to sort of disengage from that fight or flight and turn towards the love and the compassion that has been probably lacking and maybe a bit malnourished when you are in this state, that being able to engage that part of the mind and flourish and fuel and just devote energy to that, that part of the brain then can light up, which is the part that does so much healing to the body as well.
Yeah, well, you're reminding me of another experiment on a lama. He's no longer with us, but he was a great lama. And I think it was Baka Tulku. And this was a long time ago when they didn't have so much knowledge about different parts of the brain and what happened in the different when the different parts lit up and things. So they noticed that his a certain part of his left hemisphere, I think it was I'm not sure exactly which part of the left hemisphere, but prefrontal cortex area was lit up. I mean, it was just totally lit up. And the right side, nothing. And they were like, oh, this poor guy, he's only got half a brain working. And sweet old guy, but this kind of thing. Well, then they found out more about what was going on when these lit up. And it turned out that positive emotions like love and compassion were lighting up the left side of the brain. And on the right side of the brain, when that lights up, it's more fear, anger, all those kinds of negative emotions. And he just didn't light up on that side at all.
Oh my gosh. It's just
Yeah.
so fascinating. Wow.
Yeah. So we can, one step at a time, one day at a time, shift the habits of our brain and the habits of our mind. And those aren't quite the same thing, in my opinion. And change the pathways and make, the cow paths into highways and other highways into, little tiny cow paths. We can change that. Neuroplasticity is a thing, So it's one of those things like practicing piano or speaking a language where you just do it every day and you get better and more fluent with it. It's just the same with this.
Yeah. And I think that that is the best news of all of this to give people struggling with anything, long COVID or any limiting beliefs or health issues, is that that piece of neuroplasticity, that we are a bundle of habits, and the more we do one thing, it strengthens that, and the more we do something else, it will strengthen that. So this practice is so important and such a gift to be able to learn that people can do on their own and in the comfort of their own home. They don't have to go to a doctor to do it, and it doesn't have side effects, or the side effects are good side effects at least.
Yep, and $0.
Yep, yep. Well, what do you think? Do you think now is a good time to lead us through the meditation the Tonglen meditation that you were talking about?
Sure. Yeah, and I'll explain, how it works and what's going on and how to do it and that sort of thing. It's really pretty simple, but at first it's going to feel probably a little bit, wonky because it's new. So Tonglen in Tibetan means like giving and receiving, because it's going to be this exchange. So I mentioned that, we have internal conversations all the time, let's admit it. And they invade our meditations all the time, let's admit it. In this meditation, it's actually building on that natural human habit to have internal meditations, but turning it into a much more positive thing. So what's happening is it's a compassion meditation. And when you think, what is compassion really? It's that you're moved by somebody's suffering and you want to take that away from them and give them happiness instead. So that's the taking and sending. And one mistake that people sometimes make with this practice is they think they have to take on somebody else's suffering, which is not the case. So I'm going to step back a little bit into just an understanding that I have, and compared notes with people of other religions and people who aren't religious. All of us, I think, have a sense that we come from one great big source. I think you can even talk to quantum physicists who will kind of say the same thing. And so here we are, like these waves that the ocean is making, right? And it loves to make all these different waves, and each wave is unique. And yet, what are we made of, actually? We're made of ocean, all of us. And so the waves are connected through the ocean. And, stop and think, why is it when I see a stray dog on the street, that, a puppy that's hasn't eaten, obviously, and is looking very lonely and, scared, we're moved. Well, if we were really separate, why would we care?
Yeah.
So I think that's evidence that we really are all connected. So that makes it possible to do this amazing practice, truly transformative if you stick with it. Again, habits. So what we do is we imagine somebody in front of us who is suffering somehow, and we don't want to see them suffer. So we take in that suffering through, we breathe, we use breath, because breath connects the whole nervous system and the brain and so on, and yet it's under our intentional control. So there are a lot of things in the nervous system that we can't control, right? But breath is one of those amazing things that's connected to both sides of the nervous system, so we can do it while we're sleeping. We don't have to tell ourselves to breathe. But while we're awake, we have some control over it. So it's such a basic thing that we carry with us all the time and has this special quality. So we use breath, and we use this tendency to have interactions with somebody in our mind. And so we're going to have this interaction where we take in the suffering. We imagine, because again, we visualize, right? We imagine a conversation with a coworker that was frustrating, and what we could have said. And so we have this imaginary conversation. But in this case, we're going to do something a little more elevated. We're going to breathe in the suffering. So we're seeing them, kind of looking like they're suffering. And we breathe it in the form of like these dense, almost like storm clouds, that are dark and dense and, feel sort of heavy. And so we breathe them in through our hearts into that great big ocean that forms all of us, right? It can take all the suffering and no problem. So we breathe it through the doorway of our hearts, and through our compassionate intention, we can do this. So we actually breathe that in, and it goes through the doorway of our hearts into the great ocean. And that ocean has, many qualities, one of which is love, and another one is compassion, ultimate compassion, because of course the ocean is connected intimately. It's, it is composing the waves that it's making. So it feels directly all of the suffering and feels great compassion and love and caring. So we tap into that vast ocean of love and compassion, and we send it out on these bright, spacious clouds that come and envelop the suffering person and soak into them. So we feel like, finally I can do something, And we see this joy soaking into them, and they begin to smile. And it may take a couple of breaths, but we wish for them complete relief of that suffering and complete happiness now and always. So that is, the basic interaction. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with ourselves and give compassion to ourselves. And then we're going to step it out little by little to include first me, and then my people or my pet or whatever it is. And then we step it out a little further. Maybe it's, people we kind of know and we kind of like. And then maybe people we don't know. But now we're feeling this tide of compassion, and we don't want them to suffer that either. So yeah, we'll breathe for them. And finally we think, well, at some point, and time is not linear. Scientists and all spiritual traditions have said that. So at some time, everybody has experienced suffering, even if it's not in this moment. So we can breathe for everybody. And I believe that this is not only helpful to us personally to widen that lens, but also the world really needs this right now because there's too much us and them thinking.
Mm.
And so many of the problems are coming from us, them thinking. The terrible thing is our brains are actually set up to process stuff about people we consider to be us in a different part than people we consider to be them, which
Mm.
makes me embarrassed to be human, frankly.
Mm. Mhm.
But I'm sure in tribal times that was necessary for survival. But
Mhm.
right now, for the survival of humanity, it's working against us.
Mhm.
So this is a way to reframe it so that everybody is us.
Mm. Oh, I
And
just
then I just want to add one piece. When we are suffering, and we're going to work on something that we've probably all suffered from. I was mentioning to you earlier, when I stub my toe, my entire lens is exactly the size of my toe.
Mhm.
Ow, right? So my suffering causes my lens to get really small. And then my whole lens is filled with suffering. So anything I can do to open my lens, then it doesn't, change what just happened to my toe. But now my lens is so much bigger that this only takes up a small percentage of all and everyone, right? And so the way I feel by the end is really different. And you check it out and see if that's true for you.
Yeah, well, and I think just thinking about having gone through long COVID, um, like you were saying, the lens is you're right here. I mean, you're not getting any further than right here. You're so focused on yourself and understandably, but extending that and transforming that out further then does lighten that and turns on other parts of the brain. And yeah, what a wonderful practice. So excited to be led by a meditation by you.
All right, well, let's begin.
Okay.
So, because the first part is going to be um, compassion for ourselves, you can try having, imagining your suffering self in front of you. And that works for some people, but you could also try, and this is personally my favorite, is I imagine my suffering self tucked inside of my heart. So when I breathe in, those dense clouds are sort of, going out of them in all directions. I'm sucking them out and into the whole great big ocean. And my heart is like holding my suffering self. And then I'm breathing these, bright clouds into my suffering self. But you could also do it with yourself in front of you.
Okay.
So see what you like to do. You could try, I would suggest trying it the way I prefer it, since I've noticed that most students do prefer it that way, but it's not 100%.
Yeah.
And I would suggest picking a theme when you do this, rather than just saying suffering,
Okay.
get specific. And so I invite us to think of a time, or there could be, something right now that's like this, a time when you've been misunderstood.
Mm.
And I think all of us have experienced that in some way or another. I suggest you not pick something really big and heavy. This is your first time out the gate and, you're just trying out this practice. So, pick something that was just like an annoying conversation that just kind of bugged you, and you felt like they weren't really getting you, they weren't understanding you, that kind of thing. And, there's some hurt with that, right? So that is a suffering. I think we all want to be seen, and so often we don't see each other very well. So I invite you to pick some time when you haven't really been seen, and that unseen feeling, that suffering from that. So I suggest you close your eyes so you can imagine all this stuff. And imagine whatever it was that was the misunderstanding. But rather than going into the story, focusing now just on the experience of suffering, simply that. And so your great compassionate mind can tuck that suffering self, which is only a small part of you, right? So you're going to tuck that suffering self into your heart. And you don't want this one to suffer. You want to replace that suffering with joy, happiness. And so you breathe in the suffering in the form of those dense clouds, which go through the doorway of your heart into the great, vast ocean of awareness that is the source of us all. And on the exhale, you're going to you're drawing from joy from the ocean that has plenty of it, ultimate joy and compassion. You're going to send that joy into this suffering one in the form of those bright, spacious clouds. So on the exhale, they envelop this suffering one and soak into them, filling them with joy. Now let's do another breath with less of me talking. And drawing that joy from the great ocean, sending it in the form of those clouds into this suffering one. It soaks into the suffering one. They begin to relax and loosen. Your face opens. We'll do one more breath. Drawing in the suffering in the form of those dense clouds through your heart into the vast ocean that's everywhere. And on the exhale, sending the bright, spacious clouds of joy from that ocean through your heart into this suffering one. And now they're smiling and glowing, pure joy. Oh, okay, one more. And now we step it out and imagine somebody in front of us who we care very much for, and we would never want them to suffer. But they too have suffered at some point from being misunderstood, not seen. And that pained them. We don't want to see their pain. We don't want them to suffer. We want them to be happy. This is somebody we care about. And so we breathe in those dense, stormy clouds of suffering. Again, not about the story, just about the experience of suffering. We breathe it in, into our hearts, through our hearts, into that vast ocean. And then drawing from that vastness, its vast joy, through our hearts and our compassionate intent, we send those bright, spacious clouds into that suffering one. See it soaking in. And their face softens and opens. And one more breath. Breathing in those stormy clouds, through our hearts, into the vast source. And sending from that source, through our hearts, into that suffering one. Completely enveloping them, soaking into them, and they're left with pure joy. Now we might imagine whole classes of people who have been misunderstood for whatever reason. Perhaps because of their demographic, being a person of color, different sexual orientation, different neurological makeup, whatever it might be. And we don't want any of them to suffer either. We know this suffering. And we're feeling this like vast tide of compassion. And so we see them in our mind's eye all over the place. And we feel those suffering, those clouds of suffering pouring into our hearts, through our hearts, and through our compassionate intent into the ocean of awareness, the source. And that pure joy we send first from the ocean of awareness, that source, out in all directions to everyone of all of these different demographics who have suffered. Send it out on your exhale. And one more breath. Finally, we're able to do a little something for them. Sending out great joy and filling them with it. And finally, we imagine that everyone, all and everyone, have suffered some form of this at some time. And again, time is not linear. And so we want to breathe for all of them. We don't want any of them to suffer. And so we breathe in those clouds from all directions through our compassionate hearts into the great vast source of us all. And on the exhale, the vast joy of that oceanic source we send out on those sparkling, glowing, vast clouds to all and everyone. And one more time. And stay with this for just a moment, savoring how you feel right now. Notice if it's any different from before you began listening to us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know I feel different.
Me too.
Oh, yeah, it's just so transformative and hard to deny the power of it, really.
Yeah. And it does have the ability to shift how we feel, how we think, how we're, how our nervous system is working. You know, our immune system, vascular system, everything completely shifts, and it feels good, you know. So, and it's so simple. It does take some practice, just like any good tool, but it can be a tool in your toolkit.
Yeah.
And the more you practice it, the better you'll be able to use it.
Right. And being able to be led through this, not that somebody has to remember all those steps because you have, I'm assuming this meditation on accessible on your site that people could utilize.
Yep. Yeah, we have lots of different meditations, including I think a number of recordings of me leading this particular practice, which again is called Tonglen.
Well, it's just, yeah, just amazing. And it just another example of the breadth of meditation that it could be one simple breath to become present and not be caught up in the story of a sensation that came up. Uh, oh no, it's this, and our minds go that way since we're so flooded with information. To simply pause and be with that. It could be as simple as that, or it could be more in depth of a meditation like this that takes you out of yourself and reaches out to everyone that is going through this and encompasses that love and stimulates that part of the brain. I mean, there's just so many different benefits to meditation.
I would make a slight distinction and say it doesn't take me out of myself so much as it expands myself.
Mm,
So I'm
yeah.
still included.
Right. Yeah. Good point. I think I was just meaning like instead of just being so self-focused and self
Mm.
just only here, that
Yes,
right, that then you are included in that. That's a really important point to make. Thanks.
right. But I like the point you're making that we can imprison ourselves, when we're suffering, because our lens gets very small, then we're imprisoned inside this little view, you know.
It-
And so it can feel like we're kind of getting let out of prison when we find a way to expand it, gradually and skillfully.
right. And I think in a state of when you're not feeling well and you're seeing doctors and you're in this mindset of and you're trying to control the situation and you're frustrated, that really stepping away from those things that you're so focused on to the, like you said before, we can't be in a state of fear and a state of love at the same time. So if we can gradually nourish that part of our souls and of our being, of our mind and our body, of leaning more and more towards that place of compassion and love, then that other part tends to quiet. Still gets activated, but the more we have access to this in these types of practices, I mean, I really do believe that this was such a huge part of my recovery, of being able to come to that place. Um, Over and over and over again, and different sensations and thoughts arising each day, but continuing to go to that place and come centered, um, allowed that I think others, you can feel a remedy a little bit, but it's hard to, if you can't come back to that place of feeling grounded and that love, then it's and really building that foundation, then it's easier to get tipped to tip the scales the other way.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of practicing Lama's breathing before having a baby.
Yeah.
And, in the middle of the most intense part of labor, talk about pain. Oh my goodness. Um, if you hadn't already been practicing Lama's breathing, you would not be able to ride the waves.
Mm,
So there's that. And there's also just, we'd all like a vacation from that ongoing saga. And this gives you like a free vacation. You don't have to travel anywhere, but just a mini vacation where you're experiencing something completely different. So you have flipped into another place, if you will. That
yeah.
feels good, so you can visit the doctors and, read everything online, because all the stuff that's coming up, new information and so on. Great. And you can take a breather and just take a mini vacation and feel good. Just that in itself is a good thing. And the more you use this, the better you'll be able to use this tool to really achieve that.
Oh, yes, I think, and I love that vacation analogy that you used, and I used that often, that I have that there. I have that within me at any time that I can access that I would often say, "Oh, I wish I could just stop the world." And it's like, "Oh, wait, but I can just stop and just be here." And not be having to engage with all of that, or allow that to all just belong, just be around, but still find that center.
Mhm.
Yeah, so many amazing tools.
Mhm.
Um, so what else can you tell us? Anything that you want to share with us? I mean, Tonglen is such an amazing meditation practice. There's so many others. Um,
So another one, of course, shamatha meditation, which is your basic calm abiding meditation that we've all, probably heard of or have in the back of our minds something about that. But another one, when everything is swirling around you and you just feel like, "Ah, I can't do that. Another simple one is mantra,
mm,
because again, it gives you something to focus on. If it's just this amorphous sort of calm your mind, that's hard,
yeah.
you know. So focusing on mantra, can really help. And we're just starting to post more and more mantras on our website. So I don't know if you know of, yeah, you know of Deb Hicks, who's also known as Joan Zen.
Mhm.
So she's one of our students.
Oh,
And yeah, a long-time Dharma student and an incredible voice, right? And so she's put together some really beautiful mantra. And so you can chant along with that and just put it on, what do you call that? Where it goes again and again.
repeat.
Yeah, put it on repeat for as long as you feel like, you
And
know.
so how would somebody, if that was something they wanted to explore, first, I mean, maybe explain a little bit what a mantra is, and then
Yes.
is there, I know that there are different mantras that might conjure up certain feelings. How would one determine which mantra might be best for them at a certain time? Is it just a felt sensation, maybe?
So I'm going to have to use the word archetype because it's really appropriate for a lot of Tibetan practices. They make big use of archetypes, archetypal images, archetypal sound, which is mantra, in order to help us find the channel changer, to not be stuck on this channel, but be able to tune into different archetypes. And we have all the archetypes in us because we're made of that ocean I was talking about, and the ocean has all of them. And so these archetypes are different facets of enlightened mind, different facets of that great awareness. And so we can evoke those from within ourselves and invoke those from all around us, because principles of reality, where aren't they? Right? And so the problem though is, how do we tune into this or that one? So you use image, you maybe learn something about the story around that particular archetype, and you use archetypal sound. Sanskrit is constructed very specifically to help you tune into different aspects of enlightened mind. So, for example, I'm thinking of Chenrezig, also known as Avalokiteshvara, depending which language you're talking about. Chenrezig is the Tibetan. And he is the bodhisattva of compassion. And so there are a couple of different forms of him, but, I'm pretty sure we have me chanting his mantra on our website. You can click on that. You just look for practices and pull down the menu and see what you'd like to click on. But again, compassion activates that area of the left prefrontal lobe that has to do with positive emotions. And it's kind of interesting that compassion is included. That lights up when you feel compassion, even though you can be crying when you're feeling compassion, right?
Mm.
But nevertheless, it's a positive emotion. So that's one. And again, when we're suffering, I think, it really helps to then step that out and realize I'm not the only one suffering. There are plenty of people suffering from long COVID, for example. I know people, we all know people. So, that's an example right there. But there are other ones that are like fierce and wrathful. And so the image is of somebody with their hair, it looks like flames. They have big eye teeth and they have bulging eyes, but they're actually enlightened mind that is just being very fierce.
Mm. Wow.
So that's a different mantra and a different image, that kind of thing.
Uh, well, and it's just so cool how I know for me, there were many different, depending on the day and the sensation, that things that I needed to change, flip the script, change where I was. I was in a headspace and feeling certain things, and I needed to get out and take a walk, or I needed to jump in a cold shower. But something like this, that we can say a mantra that can immediately turn on one part of the brain and quiet another, is such an amazing thing to be able to access. I mean,
Mhm.
and to find one that might work for you, that, I mean,
Mhm.
so many cool things.
Yeah, and again, the more you use it and develop familiarity with that channel, the easier it is to use that channel changer to tune into that channel. So,
Right.
that's
And
something.
that's a lot easier than having to jump in a cold shower if you're in a meeting.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are various and there are very simple breath things you can like clearing the stale winds it's called, and there's also recordings of me teaching that takes 30 seconds, and you could just like if you're at work and it's really tough, you go to the bathroom, you know, lock the little stall door and do this exercise, and nobody knows what's happening, and it really clears things out.
Mm. Oh, awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much. So,
Thank you.
another thing that we know that can flip the script, and another way to feel as though we are in community with everyone, is laughter.
Yeah.
And if we can stop and laugh by ourselves, or ideally with somebody else, that can generate so many endorphins and serotonin and all the good juices in the body to change how we can feel. And that too can be a practice. So, as I warned you, well, and it wasn't a warning because you're so funny, and in
Thank
your
you.
books that I've read, I mean, you have such a great sense of humor and you have such a great laugh that I've been really looking forward to this part of laughing with you. And I think you even said when we spoke, like, laughing just at the absurdity of laughing for no reason, just laughing, because it can be a bit uncomfortable. But I'm hoping we can do that together right now. And I'll get out my timer and we'll laugh for 30 seconds. And
That's so funny. We will now laugh for 30 seconds.
I know, but I want there to feel like there is an
Yeah.
ending.
Yeah.
And so we can warm ourselves up, and here we go.
All
Ready,
right.
set, laugh.
Oh
Oh,
my gosh.
yeah. Oh, that was so well. And my dog here, she was like coming over. She's like, "What's going on? What are you laughing at, huh?" And we went even 33 seconds because I just couldn't stop laughing. You such a great laugh. Thank you so much for that, for everything, for your knowledge and sharing this amazing gift with us. And I really
Thank
do
you.
hope that we can have a part two to talk about more things. I'm sure that folks are going to say, "Oh, I want to know more about this," or "What about this?" Or
And
I,
there's other meditations we didn't even talk about. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And I think breaking it up will be great for people to get little bits here and there. And
Yeah.
I
Well,
bless.
I'm so happy to be able to help because this is a very mysterious and frustrating journey to be on, whether it's long COVID, which is, probably most people, but I think there are more people who listen to your podcasts and so on who are on various frustrating journeys, and to be able to have more tools while we're here, whatever happens in the future, we can't just live for the future, but also for right here, right now, and the future. I'm so happy to be able to share something, and thank you so much for your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope that it's a benefit to people. And I know this will be of benefit, like you said, not just for people with long COVID, but I mean, in everyday life, every person I believe would benefit from meditating. And yeah,
Yeah,
again, thank you so much. And I'll look forward to next time.
me too. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.